Hey everybody, it's Melanie Thomas here. Welcome to the very first episode, number 1 of the A.S.P.I.R.E podcast. What does that mean? It stands for Ask Smart People in Real Estate. So the idea here is to get the smartest and sharpest minds in the industry to come and chat with us about the topics of the day, what's affecting our communities, what's affecting the real estate world in general, and maybe some just life issues in general. Real estate is life to me. So I am so honored today to have as my first guest on the show one of the smartest people in real estate that I know, and just in general, period. This person is coming at this issue we're going to talk about today from 3 perspectives. She is the current mayor of the City of Oviedo. She's also a real estate broker like myself, and she's an attorney to boot. So I'm hoping that she can bring all those levels of expertise into this conversation where we're going to discuss the proposed abolition, as it were, of property taxes in the state of Florida. So with no further ado, let me bring my esteemed guest on, Mayor Megan Sladek. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat with us here. How are you doing today?
Oh, doing well. Glad to talk about something very controversial and very
I know. I
timely.
mean, you never shy away from that, is what I'm told. But that's why I'm glad to have you on, because I know one thing I appreciate about you is that you never are hesitant to tackle the hard questions and force people to kind of think of other ways to deal with problems or find solutions and think outside the box. That's a term that's near and dear to my heart. So let's just go right at it. We're hearing all this stuff, all this chatter, and it's not just chatter, because as I understand that this is actually being proposed already with the state legislature to put this on the ballot in November, getting rid of property tax. So when you hear that as a mayor who, reads city budgets and knows how municipalities are funded, what is the first thing that you think about when you hear people talk about let's get rid of property tax?
Well, I just don't think it's going to happen, first off. So we can talk about it and go down all the rabbit holes. But I think even the legislators in Tallahassee know that there's no better way to fund our first responders. So I don't think at the end of the day, first off, I'm not sure they're going to put it on the ballot. If they do put it on the ballot, I don't think that 60% of Floridian voters will vote to abolish property taxes, because people like it when they call 911 and something happens. And there's no there's no plan for how to fund any of these things if we get rid of property taxes.
Gotcha. Well, call me a cynic, but part of me believes that a lot of this is kind of just bluster to, because who wants to pay taxes, right? And everyone, if you hear get rid of taxes, who's not for that, right? But I'm wondering, let's just talk about like what's being proposed. Or where I understand it, there's different proposals on the docket. The one is where it by 2027, all property taxes, homesteads will be done, right? And then there's one where it's kind of phased in over 10 years, and then there's all these other
Yeah.
little things. So I can't imagine any world where in 1 year we would abolish all of property tax and replace all that funding. So I agree with you on that one. But how much of this is, actually seriously being considered? You say it can't happen, but I've said that about a lot of things, and I see every day things happen that I never thought would happen. So could this really be pushed through if the citizenry is told that, hey, this is going to be a benefit to everyone?
Well, what's going to happen is something will replace it, because people will not accept a Florida where there are no police and firefighters that are publicly funded. So this isn't just getting rid of taxes at the city level, this is at the county level. So if you unfund cities and you unfund counties, right, that's who provides police and fire. So at the county level, there is authorization and state statutes as they stand right now. They're allowed to charge a public safety fee and fund the sheriff's department. So they could, overnight, they could come and say, okay, we're just going to charge a fee instead. Well, the difference is typically your fee is not related to the value of the property. So what will end up happening is, if you're 90 years old, you homesteaded in the first year you could, and you're paying $100 a year in taxes because your home was worth next to nothing when you moved in. Well, all of a sudden, we've abolished property taxes and replaced it with a fee, because the state keeps saying, we insist that you must not decrease police or fire. So what do? Well, you pivot and you do what you're allowed to do, and that is charge a fee, where each equal user of the service pays an equal amount. Well, then you've got the 90-year-old lady paying the same amount as the 22-year-old who just got a toe in the door of the real estate market. So is that fair? There's a level on which that's more fair. And there's also a level on which that's less fair. If you're 90, you feel like that's way less fair. And if you're 22, you feel like, wow, this is much more fair because I was going to have to pay. And what happens now, and you see this in real estate, you move into a house, you've got the 20 something year old next to the 90-year-old. The 90-year-old's paying 100, the 20-year-old's paying something like 15,000. And same exact services are being provided and consumed. And is that fair? Well, when that 20-something-year-old is 90, if the system holds long enough to make it there, well, it will feel unfair not to give the cheaper rate later. It's like you pay more now so you can pay less later.
Mhm.
I don't want to say
All
more than
depends when you got into the ecosystem, right? So
that's exactly right.
I like that the concept of fairness, right? So to me, we obviously our tax code right now, presently, it's progressive, right? When it comes to income tax, so the more you make, the more tax you pay. But of course, there are ways for people to not pay as much tax as what would be required legally through, tax, shelters and all that good stuff. But the one kind of, to me, remaining bastion of where that can't really be tricked is with property values, right? Because if you own a home on Fisher Island and somebody else owns a 2-bedroom bungalow somewhere in, Zephyr Hills, all right, they're going to pay according to the value of that property. If you take that away and everyone is kind of on a equal plane paying for services, is that fair?
Yeah, is it more fair or less fair? I am. The voters are going to have to decide if something actually shows up on the ballot. Yeah, I just don't know how that's going to shake out because no renter will want to abolish property taxes or even decrease them. So it's not a abolition of them; it's a shifting. So if you have people who are homesteaded pay fewer taxes, that means that non-homesteaded properties pay more because you need the same amount of money, and they're not proposing to get rid of the school taxes. And I think that's very interesting because Florida state constitution requires that the state provide an education. So if the state realizing, oh, we're required to provide an education, we must fund public schools. What's a way we can for sure get the money? Oh, property taxes. And then they turn around and say, oh, well, you have to fund police and fire. And also you can't have a funding source. So we're going to ratchet it down. Like, what's the alternative? I
Okay,
don't
so
know.
let's look at it from both sides, right? So there are people, and make the argument, and I can see the logic to that, where they feel like I own my house free and clear, but I don't, because really, if I don't pay the taxes to my county, they have the right to seize my property, which means I really never own it because I'm always technically renting this land from the municipality, and they can seize it from me at any time should I. So why should I continue to pay taxes on an asset that I have owned for 20 years? For what purpose? So that's the argument that's being made on that side. And what are your thoughts on that kind of thinking?
Well, if we charged people tax at the point of death, when that person gives their $500,000 asset to the next generation, and those next people pay no taxes when they get the appreciated value, so that we're never capturing tax on the unrealized gain. So I get that people are like, well, it's not fair for me to pay taxes on the unrealized gains in my property or to rent it. But we don't think twice. Yeah, I got my cell phone here. I have to have it be useful to me. I have to pay my monthly bill, and I can have it without, but it does not function. And granted, nobody's going to come and seize my cell phone. I can use it for something, and hypothetically somebody will seize the property, but realistically the next generation that's going to inherit that property will not allow that to happen. So the way the system works is if you don't pay your property taxes on time, somebody comes and buys the tax deed. They pay your taxes that year, and you get, basically it's an involuntary loan. Somebody pays it, and the way they choose who gets to win the bid is who will offer you the lowest interest rate. It's a beautiful system. So whoever will give you the best deal, that's who gets to buy the right to pay your taxes and collect from you later. So you have to not pay your taxes. You do this 3 years before you actually go to the courthouse steps. So you have 3 years to realize I haven't paid my taxes. I'm feeling stubborn. I'm whatever. And typically a kid of an older person will look at the situation and say, oh, mom owns her house free and clear. It's worth $1.2 million. Either we just don't pay because we're stinkers, or we figure out as the kids how we're going to get her taxes caught up because she only owes $6,000 because she was homesteaded so long ago. And they will just pay the taxes and figure out how to keep that situation going until such time as, instead of inheriting a $200,000 house that is now valued at $1.2 million, they don't pay tax on the $1 million in appreciation. They have just paid property tax along the way to the point of mom's death to inherit all of that.
Right. So what you're referring to, in case people don't know what you're talking about, is people can purchase tax certificates, right? That or liens against, a property for unpaid taxes and hold it and make interest on it over a certain period of time. So
There's a
yes, that,
there's a 3-year cap though, so that's where this all gets kind of wild. Because what I asked legislators is, what problem are you trying to solve? And they said, we don't want people to lose their home. I said, well, then why don't you just have a longer hold time for these tax certificates? But if say you're 30 years old and you decide, I own my house, I feel like I'm renting from the government, I'm going to quit paying. Well, is somebody going to hold the tax certificate for 60 years until you die at 90? There's no certainty under a new system where we would never actually call the loan, call the involuntary loan that has been made by people who know they've got a 3-year max repayment cycle.
so just back it up a little bit so people understand. So like I said, as a mayor, you look at budgets, you understand what the funding needs of a city are. But just give us the quick version of how property tax is collected, and it's through the county level, right? And then the cities are, how is that money? So for example, we're both here in Seminole County, where we have Oviedo, Sanford, Winter Springs, Longwood, Castleberry, Lake Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Did I miss one? Winter Springs.
Winter Springs, yeah.
Okay, so give us the quick rundown on how, because I have seen people or the governor speaking on television saying that basically people like yourself at the city and county levels are mismanaging funds, that you have all this surplus of money because of all the explosion in property values, and why are you still crying broke? Because you should be utilizing your funds better and spending money more wisely, and so on and so forth. So how does the process work? And then speak to if there's validity to that. Do you have this wild surplus, since the pandemic on to now, where you have all this excess money in the coffers to use for city services and county services?
So we don't have an enormous excess. What we got was a lot of ARPA money. So during COVID, the federal government basically gave us an entire year's worth of taxes. So we collect about 24 million a year. We got the year the COVID year, we got almost that amount from the federal government. So we went and we fixed a lot of deferred maintenance that had been just on the books and consumed all of that. But we have a lot of unfunded liabilities and maintenance that, if we were charging the right taxes, we would be charging even more than we are now. As things stand in the city of Oviedo, and this holds true in a lot of cities, we collect less in property taxes than we pay out to maintain our police and fire departments. So we have to get grants to just fund police and fire. And the rest is made up in fees that we charge for rec programs, grants that we try to get. So then we're just shuffling money from, the state will give us a grant, the feds will give us a grant, but we're all paying taxes into those too. So we're just shuffling everybody's money all around. So now I kind of got off onto a tangent, but yeah, there is not a surplus. And part of the main reason why is because the firefighter and police salaries are going up so fast. We don't have enough in the state of Florida. And one year the budget went up 20% just for maybe not 20. We had some salaries go up 20%. So the overall police budget went up more than the rate of inflation. So if a homesteaded property is capped at a 3%, it could only go up 3% in value. And then that's the amount of tax assessment that we are allowed to take in. But our entire budget, because construction costs have gone up, police and fire salaries have gone up, we're looking at 12%. Well, where's the 9% gap going to be made up? We have to raise the taxes or shift them to commercial somehow, or shift them to fees. Somehow or another, we have to fund what everybody has decided we ought to fund.
So how have you been covering that gap over these last 4, 5, 6 years? Is it through increases in, because the non-homesteaded taxes are also capped, are they not, at like 10% a year? Isn't that right? So where's the excess money? What are you taking from to cover those gaps and shortages right now?
We are allowed to, there's some like some utility funds that are allowed to be used to cover certain portions of, different functions of the city. We have the 1 cent sales tax. That's what we used almost exclusively to repave the roads. So we're only allowed to use the 1 cent sales tax, which is in addition to, Florida's got the 6 cents, and then we can add a penny. So Seminole
Hmm.
County added the penny, and we all agreed ahead of time how that would be given out to the cities and county who gets what, and the schools. And so sidewalks and roads come from that. So if we did not have that penny tax, we would really be in a bad way, because then we'd have to raise general revenue taxes to cover police and fire and roads and sidewalks. So
What
there's
about all the other things? Like in Seminole County, we pride ourselves on, being, natural. So all of these beautiful parks and recreational facilities that we have, where is the money coming from to cover those types of community amenities?
a lot of it's coming from state level grants, and different layers of government grants. So we got in Oviedo a grant from the federal government to help relocate our perk ponds. So we also have what are called enterprise funds. So we operate a water utility, and we're allowed to charge whatever the market will bear. And so we can skim some extra profit off of that, put it into the general fund to help offset loss, the lack of enough in those funds. And same thing for our sewer and reclaim water fund. We can charge whatever the market will bear. And typically the politicians will not agree to set the rates too high. A really great example of using that well is the City of Orlando. They've set their rates at a place where, even though they are substantially higher for out of city users than in city users, Oviedo is a user. And it is cheaper for us by a huge margin for us to buy their hiked up priced water and sewage capacity than it would be. So it would be cheaper. It's cheaper for us to do that than to build a new sewer plant and have our own situation going with bonds. So I think it's a great system that's allowed, and the state keeps trying to come and take that away too. And in Orlando, I can't remember the exact amount, but I want to say it's like it's like $500,000 that OUC gives to the general fund. And double check me on that. I just remember seeing it one time and thinking, wow. But also, they have done so many things in partnership with Oviedo that have saved us so much money. So even though they're making a profit, they're
Mhm.
doing it at a more fair rate than the private sector power companies are. So, like, yay, kind of a thing.
You talked about bonds. So if this were to happen, are there like existing obligations that you would have, like for bonds and things of that would be adversely impacted if
We
the
do
revenue was
not
reduced?
have any, we don't have any bonds right now that are against the general fund. So any bond we have is up against, is backed by like an enterprise fund, like water, sewer, where it's a rate and we are guaranteed that we'll get a certain amount. So
Okay.
interesting fun fact, if you turn your water off, you still have to pay the base rate when you reconnect the water. So if you go 3 months and you say, I turned off my water for 3 months, no, you're still going to get charged for 3 months of water with having used none, because our bond obligations require us to essentially collect that tiny mortgage payment from that property address every month.
Gotcha. So you answered all those questions with your mayor hat, which is good. But now I want you to put your real estate broker hat on. And some of the arguments being made are here in favor of this, or this is going to be great for property values, and people will be incentivized even more to move to Florida because the taxes will be lower and so on and so forth. What say you about that?
I say anyone who thinks that needs to read this fantastic book called A Libertarian Walks into a Bear. And it is
Okay.
about a town in Connecticut. I think it's Connecticut, some New England place. And these people hated taxes. And it goes through the history of this town back to like the American Revolution, where everybody just wanted to do their own thing and they're going to hoe their own, do their own, they're going to protect themselves. They've got their own guns. They're going to keep their own roads up and all this stuff. And it contrasts this town. It's a little bit of a hot mess with the town, 30 minutes away that charged taxes, and was not libertarian about the whole approach. And the property values in the place where taxes were charged were so much better. And it was like you called 911, something happened.
Somebody
And
showed up.
yeah, somebody showed up. So in this little town where nobody wanted to pay taxes, yeah, there's somebody's house burns down. That's how the whole book starts. Is they had a volunteer fire department, and that's what people say. They're like, we could just get a volunteer fire department. Well, if everybody's in charge, nobody's in charge. So if the entire town maybe is going to volunteer to show up to a fire, you know who's coming when there's a town of 42,000 people? Probably nobody's coming because they all think somebody else is going to get there.
Got it. It's like, I thought you had it. I thought you were on fire duty tonight.
You're going to keep Megan's house from burning down.
Okay. Well, I for one appreciate when I call the fire department, they don't show up with like a credit card swiper before they pull out the hoses. But the question has also been floated that, okay, let's just give like relief to seniors then, or people who have lived in their house for a certain amount of time. Is there a compromise here that makes sense to you between getting rid of everything and just cherry picking who benefits and who doesn't?
So that's the problem with the cherry picking. So if you say only people who own their own homes get to not pay property taxes, you're basically saying only the people who are rich enough to have figured out how to pay off the house and to own a big asset in this non-liquid form, only those rich people get to have the extra benefit of paying no taxes. Yet we're going to shift all of the burden to continue to pay police and fire to the renters who can't figure out how to save up enough to get their toe in the real estate market. That is tremendously unfair, in my opinion, and regressive and wrong. It's just wrong.
I agree. So now I want you to put your attorney hat on, because yes, if something goes on the ballot, it does require 60%. We know that. But my assessment of how these ballot measures are written up is that it's, no offense to your attorney brethren, but they ran them in such a way sometimes where you are thinking you're voting yes, but you're really voting no. And it's impossible to figure out what the heck it really means. So thinking that most people who just see, oh, abolish taxes, you had me at hello, I'm voting yes. What do you think can be done so that people can be educated and aware that if this thing actually gets on the ballot, that they understand what they're voting for?
I think
and
the Realtor Association will put an incredible amount of investment into defeating this. I think the firefighters and police officers unions will also jump in, and the teachers unions, because they get funded in large part from property taxes too. So even though they're not unfunding teachers, a lot of them are married to first responders. And and I'd love to see stats on that one day. But the number of people that I talked to from just Oviedo's police and fire department who have a spouse who's a teacher, I'm like, wow, this is uncanny. But yeah, I think that it's going to be hard to get anybody who does not yet own a home to vote for it because they realize, oh, this doesn't help me. This is going to make my rent higher. Then you go to people who are seniors who may, if they do the age restricted thing, well, any older person who owns more than just the home in which they live, or who has ever owned a business, or who still owns a business and has commercial rent or commercial taxes to pay on a building that they even own. So if you own anything but what you live in, and you say, well, who owns most of the real estate in the state of Florida? People 65 and older, don't you think? I would bet there's statistics somewhere that probably says that. So
be plausible, yep.
Yeah, so you say, okay, well, you can have this thing on your homestead if you give up all of the tax exemptions on the rest of your property. Well, hike those to the moon to make up for your house not not being taxed. So I think you've got at least a third of people are renters, and I think you have at least a third of people who own more than just their own home. So, there's no way, or you don't even need to get to that. You need to get to 31%, or what is it, 41% of people need to either be renters or own more than their own home. And I think that that is the situation in Florida.
I was reading one of your posts talking about this online, and some people were uh, saying that the numbers weren't being communicated, accurately. So, in other words, a city like Oviedo, where there may be more single family homes versus a city where there's, a lot of multifamily rentals or a lot more commercial properties, would this cause a complete imbalance between those types of communities, and would
Oh,
put certain cities at threat and other cities at an advantage? And how would that look to you?
well, it wouldn't be an advantage really. It would be some cities would be able to figure out a way to shift their taxes and survive, and others would not. In a city like Oviedo, where 80% is single family residential, if that in like 70, I don't know, 70 or 80% of that is homesteaded. So if 80% of the 80% were to be eliminated, we don't have a replacement revenue opportunity, because though counties are allowed to charge a law enforcement fee, cities are not. So we would have to right away, if we couldn't get rid of our police, we would have to say, hey, sheriff, we need you to take over because we got no money for our police force. Like, we got no money. We do have an option at the state level to have a fire fee. So we actually already have the infrastructure in place. We have created a fire district, but we have never funded the fire district. So we wouldn't be allowed to charge it based on the property value, but we could charge that fee where the 22-year-old is charged the same rate as the 99-year-old in the $1.2 million house. And we just all meet somewhere in the middle. So then we've subverted the whole point, and the 99-year-old's mad. And I think that that message will be communicated, and the 99-year-old will say, I don't even want that.
Mhm. So, do you believe then that the way that we're doing it now is the best and only way? I mean, is there any different way to look at this? Obviously, there's stuff that has to be paid for, and even in all this legislation, they mandate, police and fire can't be touched, can't be touched. Okay, we would all agree with that, right? But uh, do you think there is some different way of doing this that would be more equitable, more reasonable, more fair across the board?
Yes. Oh, I'm glad you asked. It is completely against the Constitution in Florida to do it. But what would be terrific is to charge people for what could be on their land. So, say and you see this a lot of times in big cities. You'll have a parking lot, and it's surrounded by skyscrapers. You're like, what's with this parking lot in the middle here? Well, they're land banking. If you charged the same tax on the land under the parking lot as you did for the land under the building where it's been improved and made amazing, then it would eliminate this incentive to save until later the opportunity to build. And it would make the land under, like, it equalizes everything out. And it does create kind of a tricky situation that, Homestead was supposed to cure. Like, you're a little old lady, you live on the beach, and all of a sudden the hotels are around you. Life doesn't feel very fair. Well, is it fair to you, to society, for you to sit there on this land that's worth so much and refuse to allow it to turn into its highest and best use for society, while you don't pay taxes that reflect what taxes could be collected if society as a whole were benefiting more? So that's not allowed under Florida's Constitution. But since they're thinking about amending it anyway, it's an interesting thing to charge people based on what the land could be, but not penalize them. So if you have your piece of land, you pay what it is, whether it's empty, whether you build max out on it. So if you build the max out, well, you get the benefit of it. Great for you. But if you don't, and society has decided that you could build something on it, and yet you squander it, or you try to hoard it, and you play these games with it, then it eliminates that benefit.
Oh, Megan, you're going to get all the comments on that one now.
It's an
But
interesting
so are
idea.
you saying that would apply to like agricultural land or some other kind of land that the people,
Everything.
everything?
If the highest and best use is ag land, then you would be charged as if it's ag land. But if you are land banking a store, people do this with self storage facilities. They put the self storage facility. I'm
Hmm.
sure you've seen this, and you're like, "What's that self storage facility doing there?" Well, they completely depreciate it. After about 30 years, everything around it builds up, and then boom, The land's worth $1 bajillion, and in the meantime, they pay taxes on it as if it was a permanent storage facility, which is perfectly allowed. It's a good strategy from a real estate and investment perspective, but is that the best thing for society for that to happen? And if we were taxing people based on what it could have been and not what they decide to make it,
Hmm.
and that's the thing. Like, should we take away the right, the obligation of the state to tax based on what we decide to use it for versus what it could be used for?
Yeah, I would think that some people would argue that that's overstepping on people's property rights or what have you. But I appreciate you putting that out there, because what other ways are there, right? You have to think of different alternatives. Um,
We could just not have homestead. This is a very unique thing that is it
yes,
exists in Florida. So a lot of other cities, or places everywhere, they just charge you based on the market value. So you don't have the situation where I'm paying this and my neighbor's paying that just because I moved in sooner.
right. Is there anyone, if this was instituted as it's being proposed, who would benefit from that the most?
The rich people. The richer you are, the more you benefit from it.
Okay, so
Probably. Because then you just pivot. You say, well, I'm going to sell all my stuff so I don't have to pay taxes. And then you put it into the stock market or some other place that's tax advantage. So real estate ceases to be a tax advantageous place to put things in Florida. And you just shuffle around your portfolio.
so you're saying you don't have a crystal ball, nor do I, but odds 1 to 100% that this actually gets on the ballot in November this year in any way, shape, or form of any of the proposed legislation.
Oh, do I think it's going to? I think it's going to be what drives people to the polls and that it's going to fail. But I think that that's going to be what um, certain politicians use to get people interested enough to go out and vote.
Okay. So I don't really see this as being like a wedge issue necessarily, because the property tax is something that is not party driven. I mean, we all pay it. Nobody enjoys it, I'm sure. But so I'm curious to know, like, where people fall
I think
across the
it
spectrum.
appears to be party driven. I look at who's supporting it. That's just
You
the
think
general.
so?
Yeah, I have not seen many people who are left leaning not say I really definitely for sure want to keep property taxes, which I've been very surprised by because I thought it would be like, oh well, it's good for number one. I'll just go along with no property taxes. But the fact that already this soon before the November vote, maybe or maybe it doesn't get to happen, that many people have already worked through the issue enough to know I like police and fire. There's no way to fund them unless other than this that I like better. Leave well enough alone. Like that's incredible that volume of people already have kind of locked in.
Hmm. Well, I talked to you earlier before we came online that you were recently in Tallahassee, so I'm sure this might have been a topic of discussion up there. What is the temperature of the legislature from your visit there? What is the appetite for pushing this through that
I
you were
think
able to?
on the House side, they're moving the bills. I think on the Senate side, they look at the reality of there is no alternative funding source for police and fire other than eliminating cities and booting it to the county. And that is not something a lot of places want. So you risk alienating a lot of voters at this. If you're a state level politician, you risk alienating a lot of voters saying, "I just want to get rid of your hometown police and fire departments," because that's essentially what would. I don't know how we would do it
What
without.
would be the argument in favor of that? Is there some argument to be made that the counties should be, you know, governing law enforcement and
Oh,
handling?
so in the city of Oviedo, at least, we pay double tax. So we pay full freight for our share towards the sheriff's office, and we pay a second time to maintain a completely independent police department. So we basically, the politicians have given up the right for Oviedo residents to get 911 door to door service, or for the sheriff to come into our city and ticket people who are speeding. We basically said, yeah, you don't have to do that here. We got that. But we do have some shared resources. The helicopter, a lot of the SWAT team stuff is jointly operated. So, like, we do get some of what we pay towards the county sheriff's office is a service that is offered equally to every county resident. But we do not get a certain portion of what we perhaps we should get more value. So if we just stopped, we could just save, what is it, 16 million a year. You just say, look, we're just going to let the sheriff handle it. We're happy with whatever level of service the sheriff can provide.
Okay.
Not the same for fire though, because the county
Right.
is
I was going to ask you, how does that work on the fire side?
the county is actually not obligated under state law to provide fire service, though they have a separate fire district. At one point, they did fund it through the general fund, and so Oviedo residents were participating in that, and that was not fair. So they siphoned it off and said, okay, we're going to have a separate millage charged over and keep it completely from an accounting perspective separately, and anybody who opts into it, we will serve those areas who pay in. So it is mandatory to have fire service everywhere in Seminole County, either because the county says it's mandatory or because a city tells you it's mandatory if you're in its jurisdiction. But that's not an operation of state law. That's just because we've chosen this way of doing. And here's the fun part. So it's a first response system. So Oviedo's fire department will respond in Seminole County outside of our jurisdiction if we're the fastest ones to be able to get there. And same thing for Seminole County. So if they get a 911 call and Oviedo is busy doing whatever, we got 3 calls instead of 2 and we're out of fire trucks, Seminole County will come into Oviedo and they will respond. And we don't charge each other to have come to the other jurisdiction. It's just a first response agreement. So it would be a fairly seamless transition if we were to say, we're just going to all be county now, because we all have the same dispatch. We all are working with the same set of standards, and we just have different logos on some of the vehicles.
But if you okay, we're one city in one county out of how many counties do we have in Florida?
67.
67 counties. So if you have to calculate all the moving parts that would have to work together to get that to be changed in such a radical way, is that even realistic?
Oh, absolutely. So if you've got to think about it from the state legislature's perspective, they got to deal with 67 counties as it is, because under operation of Florida law, counties must exist. So everybody's in a county. Not everybody's in a city. It is the only discretionary government you can join. But there's 411 cities, and all 411 have different rules for zoning, different rules for everything, and same thing for the 67 counties. So you add it together and you've got, what is that, 478 different ways of doing things. It would be infinitely easier if the state could figure out how to get a lot of the smaller cities to just stop having a new way of doing things and just boot it to the county. And would that really change the way Oviedo operates? And like, what could we do? Like, if we had to, because of this property tax thing, cease to exist as a city, we could have the county, or no, not we, like the county could choose, out of the abundance of kindness in its heart, to create something like the Oviedo Parks and Rec District and say, look, the only thing that you're going to notice any difference on if we take over is you're going to have a different Parks and Rec scenario unless you pay a fee. And they could create a millage they could create a millage if they got rid of property taxes. They could create a fee though and say, we're all going to pay, $200 and we'll all be part of a government-owned recreation country club scenario. And that could keep the pools open and all the other stuff. And they could even say, you're not even allowed to use this unless you pay a higher fee if you live outside the rec district. So we could be in our own rec district. And then we'd have our own, police district, because they'd have to create the police fee, and we'd have our own not our own. We would be part of the county's fire district. I mean, we could offload all of the different needs from a funding perspective and maintain the feel of Oviedo without the city continuing to exist.
Yeah, that would be a tough sell, I think, but
it would be, but like, isn't it kind of interesting to you have to think, like, what's the state trying to accomplish if that's what they're trying to accomplish?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out here. In your opinion, what is the state trying to accomplish?
I think they're trying to get rid of cities. I really do.
And to just centralize power at the state level and what's the benefit to them?
They don't even need to centralize it at the state level. To have counties do it by more regionally.
Okay. So is the argument strictly because it's a money saving or more efficient way to operate
I
a
believe that
municipality?
that is truly what is driving it, because if you have a police force and you have a sheriff's office and you're paying for both, as people in Oviedo are, you are being double taxed. And we can pretend like we're getting something new and better and different, but we give up some service from the sheriff so we can replace it by paying for our own in the city of Oviedo. And that's, according to some state legislators, that is wrong.
Okay.
And because the local people won't back that up
Mm-hmm.
and like bump it to the county voluntarily, this is a way to force those discussions.
Got it. So are you having those discussions now as a council through city government because this is something that's being proposed, or is everyone kind of whistling past the graveyard? What?
Yeah. No, nobody thinks anything's going to actually happen. In Oviedo, it will require a vote of 4 people to outsource either fire or police, and there's not that many people who are even willing to have the discussion. I bring it up every now and again, and then I get booed and stuff, but I think it is something we should say out loud because it's an accounting decision. This isn't like a judgment call or a values call where we say we're trying to indicate that we don't love our hometown police and firefighters. We do. We love them. And also, are we double paying? Yes. Also, yes. So what does one do with all of these facts that are out there at the same time?
Okay. Good things to think about. Definitely some ideas that are provocative for sure. And I love that. Let's start the conversation and get it going. So knowing what we know, probably what these midterm elections will be like, I'm pretty sure, I think something's going to be on the ballot just because. So what would you recommend the average citizen who may not be all plugged into this where can they go to educate themselves on some of the stuff that you're talking about, like how their taxes work now, what they're paying, what they're not paying? Where's the best resource for Joe or Jane citizen to go to learn about this before this becomes something that they're expected to vote on, that could have a massive impact on their way of life?
Well, I recommend they go to the property appraiser site for their county. So you just Google it and look up your address. A lot of people, if you have a mortgage, you don't even know what your taxes are because the tax bill gets sent to your mortgage person. And even if you get it, because usually you'll get it delivered to your house as well, you kind of look at it, you're like, I don't know what this means. But look at the individual line items, because there's one for the county, there's going to be one for the city if you're even in a city. I was talking to a woman earlier today, and she said, I'm a proud resident of the city of Oviedo. And then she told me where she lived, and I thought, I'm not going to tell her, but she doesn't
She's
live in
not
the
in the
city.
city.
She's in unincorporated
She's in the
Oviedo.
county.
Lovely. So there are people who are outraged by the things that are happening with Oviedo's police department because they feel like they're being double charged, who are not even paying the double charge. So it's important to go look at those line items and see how much are you paying to schools, how much are you paying to cities. And the average tax bill to the city of Oviedo, I want to say it's something like $1,100. It's really
The
pretty.
average tax bill, like for a property, like a
So you got to
homestead.
look at the breakdown. So there's
Okay,
the part for the school is the biggest in
gotcha.
Seminole County. And then the county is a little bit smaller than the city usually. So it's just, there's a lot of variables. And when you go look at it, what I learned was that my husband, he works in downtown Orlando, he pays more in tolls than we pay in property taxes to the city of Oviedo. That's messed up.
Annually,
So
you mean in total?
annually,
Okay.
yeah. So
Mm,
if we're paying more in tolls, like that's just for road. That's not police and fire.
gotcha. One last thing I forgot to bring up that was proposed, and again, put your real estate hat on for this one. I've seen it floated that there would be a fee charged to people who come from out of state to purchase property here in Florida. That would help.
Do that. I think that would violate the federal constitution.
Yeah, but it's been
Like,
this is one of
no.
the things that's been floated out there. So I mean, I think I don't necessarily agree with that, but I just was curious to know if you've heard that, what you thought of that, or does that have any merit, or could that even be something that would be?
I don't think it can be done. There's also been talk of not allowing corporations to buy property. And
Hmm.
Then what do? You're not allowed trusts to own property.
Right.
Then
Slippery slope, right?
it would change the whole legal system that people have set up their estate plans already. You can't just go changing the rules.
Right. Well, sounds good though. Good soundbite.
It
So,
sounds really interesting. Yeah.
right. So that being said, who knows? None of us have a crystal ball, but we'll see what actually happens. You know, I don't know if this is where everyone will fall. You said you thought the National Association of Realtors will definitely be having something to say about all of this. What about the argument that we can just keep relying on tourism tax money? My personal opinion on that is that's not a guarantee. We saw what happened after 9/11. We saw what happened during the pandemic. So we can't be thinking that that's going to always fill a gap. But
Well,
where's the most likely place where you think surplus money or money that can be reallocated would come from logically?
they have not been willing so far to open up what the tourism money can be used for. So for years, there have been proposals to allow it to be used to pay for extra police and fire, allow it to pay for homeless services, allow it to pay for things that are related to tourists coming here or coming here and then deciding they can't get back because it costs too much. And oh, how nice and warm! It's better to be here without a roof over my head than wherever I came from. So if we have not been able to successfully get that reallocated now, with many, like all of the print newspapers have tried to sing the praises of this idea, and it's just not happening. I don't see how we, first off, liberate that. We can't liberate enough. There's not enough. If you look at how much is funding Visit Florida and the tourism, like they pay for ads for a lot of this stuff. That's just not enough to fund, what is it, 500 almost police departments and fire departments. Like, how are you going to get that much? So Oviedo alone needs 28.5 million to cover our police and fire this year. Where are we going to get it? Who's got 28.5 million for us?
Yeah.
No.
While you're looking for that money, let me know where all that lottery money's going to. I'd love to see the balance sheet on how much of that is getting used for the schools or whatever it's supposed to go towards.
Well, it's supposed to go for bright futures, and I think it probably is. But that's a whole other.
Yeah, that's another podcast episode. So Mayor Megan Sladek of the City of Oviedo since 2019, correct? Right. I appreciate you being on with me and just putting these issues out there. We certainly weren't going to make any decisions today about what's going to happen, but I love that you always kind of look at things from different angles and give people something to provoke thought. So
hopefully not provoke them to great anger on this value-added tax, which is not allowed under the Constitution yet.
Well, we'll see what actually ends up happening and where everybody falls. But I for one am glad, like I said, that when I call 911, when I call the fire department, somebody shows up. They don't ask me to swipe my card. And in reality, I don't want to be an advocate for paying taxes necessarily, but when I look at, I'm from New York State, born and raised. What I would be paying in property tax there, versus what I'm paying here and the services that I get, I'll stay where I'm at, right now. So I mean, to me, I wish the argument would be more about our property insurance. That is what, as a real estate broker, I see is impacting people and making them lose their homes. It's not necessarily the property tax. But that being said, if money can be saved anywhere, I'm all for it, right? I mean, nobody's advocating for funds just being misappropriated or wasted on unnecessary services, and everybody should tighten the belt. So I'm assuming you also agree that that's always worth examining, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, listen, Mayor Megan Sladek, thank you so much for joining me on my very first episode, number 1 of the A.S.P.I.R.E podcast. You're definitely a smart person in real estate, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. Where can people find you if they want to follow up on some of your thought-provoking ideas and reach out to you directly? What is the best way they can get in contact with you?
Probably social media. Facebook is the most interactive place where people have discussions, and I will reply on Facebook on all
She
of
doesn't
this.
hide, folks. She's out here, and you often go out in the community. You have events, live events. You do coffee and stuff like that all around the community, so people can always get to you and
Yeah,
communicate with
they
you.
come and give me a good punch to the nose over
No,
having
no,
to take
we
you.
don't want we don't want any of that. But yes, you're definitely accessible to the citizens of Oviedo. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you being here with me today. So thank you so much, Megan. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Take care.
Till next time.